Hey folks, my name is Suds.
And I'm Nikki. Welcome to Zero Calorie Marketing.
Tune in to listen to us speaking to some of the most innovative, brilliant, open-minded marketers we know.
Each episode features a different marketeer with a unique perspective on marketing, branding, life philosophy, and everything in between.
Lend us your eyes and ears for the next hour or so as we discover more about the person and also the unique path that they took which led them to where they got to.
And the real story behind the why, where, when, and how they do what they do.
Without a further ado, let's get to it. Hey everyone, we have a very special guest today. Not only because she actually hails from sunny Australia, unlike a lot of our guests we have had on so far, she has a specialism, a laser focus, if you will, for the industry she works in. This is demonstrated by the fact that she spent most, if not all of her career in it. I was actually going to do the bit where she's from Australia in an Australian accent, but it just didn't work.
Please don't, please. We'll respect ourselves, Suds.
Kristen, believe me, I actually watched a couple of the Crocodile Dundee clips just to try and get the twang, but it would have been ridiculous.
Get yourself warmed up.
So Kristen is a social media professional with a passion for beauty who moved from Australia to the UK 11 years ago to pursue her career in the beauty industry. And today we hope to talk to her about what actually brought her here to sunny, or I should say not so sunny UK, and also what is behind the passion she has for the beauty industry. We want to learn about her learnings from running major social media channels for major brands, what insights she can share with us, the highs and lows of her journey so far, as well as tips and tricks that she can offer for anyone looking to grow their social media presence. Welcome to the show, Kristen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
So today you're joining us from London.
I'm in London, yep.
But you're going to be leaving
for
the time being, because you're going to be leaving to go back to Melbourne soon.
I am. It's been 11 years in London, but my husband has just been granted his permanent residency visa for Australia. Much quicker than we originally thought. It's quite a long process, but we decided now's probably the best time to kind of pack up our lives and start a new chapter. So that's what we're doing.
We're brave in, I guess, hopefully the tail end of a pandemic. I'm being now very hopeful about where we are.
Yeah, I think we can be. There's light at the end of the tunnel now. Thank God.
There is a tunnel now, really, is what I'd say.
Yeah.
I'm
maybe not seeing the light, but there is a tunnel. So
we actually know. So I've known Kristen for nearly 4 or 5 years now, and we met when we did a bit of work for Kristen's then company, another makeup brand. I don't know, we have a good relationship with a lot of clients, but we kind of developed a really special kind of friendship, I think. And it wasn't kind of forced. It was just like we just started talking to each other. We found out that she's a massive David Bowie fan, and also. Look, and you sent us a hamper, not just any hamper, it was Fortnum's and Mason's hamper, and we thought, oh my God, she really loves us. So, we have a kind of a history together. But what I want to know, Kristen, is like, you've had your journey into the beauty world. Could you tell us what is it about this industry that makes you so passionate, and what made you want to kind of spend the last almost decade of your life working within it?
Sure. Well, I guess it all started for me back at university. My part-time job while I was studying, I was doing media and communications at uni, was working for the Body Shop in their retail store. And it became quite apparent to me that I had a bit of a passion for makeup and skincare, and I preferred going to my part-time job more than I actually preferred studying, which is kind of controversial thing to say, but it was the truth. I really thought that I would just finish uni and continue working in retail because I just loved interacting with the customers so much, and being able to play with makeup and skincare every day was ideal. And at the time, I don't think social media was such a big thing for brands to get on board with. It was more, we were kind of finding our feet. I remember creating my Facebook page back in 2008, and everyone was kind of saying, well, this is just a way to connect with our friends. It wasn't really being utilized by brands back at that point. And a lot of my university lecturers were pretty dark on, upcoming media and digital ways of working, because it just hadn't been done before. So it wasn't like an inspirational moment for me at university. I didn't leave thinking, wow, I've got all the skills to get this amazing career. It was quite the opposite. So I guess during the kind of YouTube resurgence, I don't know if you can even call it a resurgence, YouTube, the beginnings of kind of the beauty community on YouTube, this is quite cool. I did pick up a camera at one point and try to film some YouTube videos, but I'm absolutely so glad that I never got into that world because it's so stressful, and just being in the public eye all the time is not really for me. I'm quite happy being behind the scenes. So I, at the age of 21, decided to pack up my bags and come to Europe, use London as my base to travel, because being from so far away, you would need to come over to Europe for at least, 4 to 6 weeks to kind of benefit from seeing any of it. I mean, that's not really enough time, but for us, you need to make it a worthwhile journey because it is so far away. I came here, I traveled for a little bit, picked up small jobs here and there, but then I managed to land an internship with an Australian beauty company actually over here. And that kind of kicked off my communications career, and I delved into the world of social media even more. And I think to be able to say that I learned social media through a lot of experience is really cool. It wasn't something I was taught at university. It wasn't exactly the way I thought my career was going to go, but it's definitely been so fun, and it's really fast paced, and I learn something new every day, even now. So yeah, that's kind of the beginnings of my beauty career. And to be able to be passionate about what you're marketing obviously is such a luxury. I can really talk to the products that I market because I use them on a daily basis. I'm really passionate about them. It's so interesting being able to talk about these products from a digital perspective, because the customer can't try or feel these products, right? Like, they're not building that emotional connection with the products if they were to go into a retail store. And particularly over lockdown, that's been quite challenging. But I think with social media, word of mouth via social media platforms from other customers and influencers has been like such the building blocks of beauty now. You don't need to go and feel the product or try it in a store. You can feel confident to buy a lot of things online now. And every day, more and more tech is coming out that's making that an easier process.
Wow.
While Kristen was talking, it was just very sunny and glowy over there. And I was like, this is so not UK, a representation of the UK at all. I was like, the makeup was showing off. It was perfect. It just accompanied the conversation so beautifully.
It's going away now.
Kristen, was that the actual sun, or was that like the...
No, that was the sun. It kind of reflects out of the windows in the building next to us. So I think that's what was going on there. But
or was it Drunk Elephant's glow range?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I love this.
Product placement here.
Product placement, absolutely.
No, yes.
I love the boldness of moving at 21 and saying, I'm just going to go, for, I guess you planned on a shorter time frame and then ended up in the UK long term. But moving over and trying to embrace the beauty community when you initially did, what did you feel the difference was between the UK and Australia then? And how has, I guess, the UK evolved over the last 11 years of you being within the industry here?
I think I knew that to pursue beauty, I would have to move away from home anyway. Melbourne wasn't really a hub for anything back then, whereas now it's really nice to see we have like a major beauty retailer is based in Melbourne. A lot of these really cool indie brands are based from there. But for me, I was thinking, well, I'm either going to have to move to Sydney or I can move overseas. So that's what I wanted to do. It was all brand new for me. Different people in the press, different specialists over here. So with moving to the UK, I've been really lucky to work for a variety of companies, from startups to retailers to different brands in-house. So that's kind of allowed me to get a really good grasp on beauty in the UK specifically. A lot of the companies I've worked with have had major presence in the US as well. So that's been really interesting. And it's always so interesting from a marketing perspective to see how we speak to the UK market versus the US market. It's really different. But I think over the time I've been here, there's new brands every week. I swear there's new brands popping up all the time. And it's really cool to see a lot of them start out as really indie brands in the UK and then just boom and go really massive globally. In my current role, we've actually just taken on an Australian sunscreen brand, which is based out of Melbourne, where I'm originally from. And to see the reaction of us bringing that brand over here has been incredible. To be honest with you, I had heard of the brand, but I think that's more from the fact that I'm still in touch with a lot of people that are in Australia. But to see so many people who were so excited when we brought the brand over and really wanting to try it, it's been so cool. So I think definitely beauty is more of a global system now. Does that make sense? So it doesn't matter if you're a really indie brand in like a pocket of London that's just launched and you're really young. I still think there's such a thirst for these types of brands globally, which is cool.
That's awesome. You mentioned sort of different messaging for UK versus US. Can you sort of give us an example or just something? Is it a tone thing? Is it, what would you say the difference is in how you market to the US versus the UK?
It's definitely a tone thing. I think we can tell Americans, really bluntly, you need to try this product. I think in the UK, we're a little bit more analytical when it comes to purchasing anything. So we need to make sure we're providing, clinical tests before and afters, information about the ingredients that go into the products. There's definitely a little bit more research that goes into making those consumer decisions in the UK. Whereas in the US, I feel like, I don't know if it's an element of FOMO even. You can say to people, hey, you need to try this or you're absolutely missing out. And they usually buy into it, which is amazing. So I've definitely felt that when we've been making television ads, especially, we film them very differently in the US than we do here. And sometimes, that's a little bit confronting. I don't want to, we don't want to create something that's completely over the top and like, wow, you need to buy this right now because it's so amazing. But that's just what works over there.
In terms of like a lot of the marketers that we've featured so far, they tend to work in kind of like quite cold industries in a way, like we had one person who was working within SaaS sales and, like these are intangible things that you can't really see or feel. You're one of the first marketers that we've had on where people have like a very, very strong following for that brand. How do you deal with getting the kind of tone of voice right when you're talking about, say, a product that has a legion of fans? Like sometimes you have Facebook groups and you have unofficial Facebook groups of, run by followers of Drug Beauty, for example, or Charlotte Tilbury. These are nothing to do with the brand, but people go crazy about it, over it. How do you deal with trying to get the tone of voice right for these guys?
I think it's all about being a part of those communities yourself, really. And I think that's why I've continued to remain within the beauty industry, because I put in as much time as I do in work hours than I do out of work hours, because that is my hobby. So I really am a part of all of those Facebook groups myself. And that's not really I wouldn't say the reason I joined them is because of my work. I would say the reason I joined them is because of pure interest and I want to be a part of that community. But it definitely does help with my job. So that's kind of the beauty of marketing something that you use every day and that you buy into yourself. And it's incredible. Sometimes, we'll have somebody on an Instagram live or an Instagram TV, and you do feel that because you're working with these products and these brands so much, you lose the magic a little bit, right? You're not always going to fall over trying to buy the next greatest product from this brand because you've worked on that campaign for such a long time before it's launched. But we do have these people that come on and they're so passionate and they can do a 30-minute Instagram live and completely sell me on the product myself. Definitely, being part of those communities really, really helps with my job anyway.
Wow. And have you had to deal with a situation where maybe there hasn't, a new brand, for example, where you've had to create that? And what advice would you give to anyone who's had to kind of take something which they know is a very good product, but almost develop that kind of not need, but I guess, like that kind of frenzy? What are the things that you do to kind of take something from scratch and actually make it into a cult brand?
I mean, I think it's all about reputation. So we don't want to launch something that's not already loved by us or tested by us in the first place. And that's all about creating, you know, something that's curated. You want people to be just as excited as you are. And if you're excited about it, obviously, then that's going to come out in your copy and in your tone of voice and in your launch plans as well. So we like to tease our social media audiences when we have something really big coming up. They really get excited, but most of the time they find out what the product is or what the brand is through these Facebook groups. It's incredible. The research that they do, they can kind of put 2 and 2 together. And we've had a couple of big brands that we've worked with recently that have had product leaks. The product has, you know, been all over the internet a few days before they've actually launched it. And sometimes I really don't know how this information gets out. I've just gone around in a circle, guys.
Oh, that's okay.
I mean, I think that's just so interesting, the idea of, you know, people being so dedicated to a product. I guess they're searching and they're somehow I'm a bit concerned that people are finding out what a product is for launches. But you have had the luxury of working across quite a range of, company styles. So you've worked, you know, in the smaller startup indie brands and like corporations. How do you feel like both sides have to work differently? Because I think, you know, indie brands are usually just introducing themselves to the market, where corporations are, you know, they have a sustained marketplace. As the social media marketer, how do you handle conversation for an indie brand versus a corporation, and what are the adjustments you sort of have to make?
I definitely think startups and more indie brands have an advantage in beauty. They can be a little more reactive. I think that especially when we look at things like TikTok, we've had a few brands that have absolutely blown up on TikTok. And as we know, TikTok's only really taken off since lockdown. And for me, I feel like the indie brands are more on board with that strategy because they've been able to react quicker than some of the bigger brands and more corporate organizations that we work with.
I guess is this sense of not necessarily having less to lose, but being able to say, I'm going to go where the trend, that's it. Phrasing this is hard, isn't it?
It's almost like the bigger brands work so far in advance because they have to. They need to, you know, be manufacturing product at massive levels. So I guess they need to be, you know, 6 to 12 months ahead of what's happening now. Whereas the more indie brands, they're not making half that product in that frequency. So I just feel like they're able to react and respond in a more up-to-date manner, if that makes sense. And often you'll see like big things booming on social media product-wise, and there might be a trending ingredient or something, a trending product, and then in the next, 3 to 6 weeks, another brand has brought that out. And I honestly feel like looking at the trends that way gives those smaller brands a little bit more leverage in the beauty industry. They're able to react so much quicker.
In a way, it's like what Nikki was saying, when you've got nothing to lose, you are free to try everything at your disposal and really even take on new things that are untried and untested, which kind of brings me to my next question, really. As a social media marketer, how do you decide which new latest thing to try? And how do you decide when to kind of think this just isn't for us? Or, or do you just wait for the second mover advantage? Or how do you decide between what to try and what not to try?
So what's going to work for the brand, or what's going to work for me personally?
For both, actually, like in terms of how did you decide when you wanted to go on TikTok, for example, for your company?
TikTok was a weird one because I think, I'm not going to say I'm probably the oldest person on my team. Let's just put it that way. But I did not use TikTok. And I think one of the most difficult things about working in social media is as soon as a new platform comes out or a new feature on an app, everybody just expects that you know everything about it. So they'll come to you and be like, hey, what is this TikTok thing? But at the same time, we're all learning about it as you are. It's new to us as well. So I didn't really use TikTok until probably like the second half of last year when everybody was using it throughout lockdown. And, we've had conversations and we've talked about our objectives ongoing, and we decided that it would be a great way to kind of reach a new audience. Where I'm at currently, I would say our average consumer is probably between the ages of 25 and 35. So we really thought we could take advantage of that Gen Z audience by going on TikTok. And it's been so interesting. I think at the beginning of lockdown, really long form video was performing so well. But then as soon as TikTok kind of took off, it was like that was all left in the past. Nobody wanted anything that was over 15 to 30 seconds.
I think, on a brand level, you were thinking, where's our market? Are they on this platform? So it had a strategic lean, which I guess goes back to what we were talking about before, where the indie versus the, bigger corporation, where for the slightly bigger corporation, you're thinking more, I guess, logically about jumping on a platform, where another brand might just say, this seems to be doing well. Let's try, let's see if this works for us. But it's very interesting. And I think that we're seeing social media sort of change the way people are looking at ads. So in terms of, 30 seconds versus, back in the day, like a 5-minute, it'd be a nice sort of, you could do a story and have very cute sort of narratives. But now people are telling you like narratives in 5 seconds on TikTok. It's actually a bit terrifying. I'm honestly just like, how is this happening? How am I so engaged in this? So I think the question is, as a marketeer, what are you realistically doing to sort of adapt to these channels and, really change the way you're approaching adverts? So, and this could be everything from like hiring, because we're all learning on the go, to understanding maybe the brand audience isn't here, so we're not going to do this. So how have you been able to adapt actually to the attention span, basically, of the population?
I think it's all been trial and error, to be honest. We test a lot of things via organic socials first to see how they perform. And then we kind of gauge from there if we see something is performing really well. And a good example is actually, and Suds will probably nod his head at this, but we've been testing a lot of ASMR content and showcasing textures of products, really like oddly satisfying type of videos where the product's kind of squeezing out of the tube.
And I see the appeal for that, yes.
Yeah. And you do see a lot of these types of videos on TikTok at the moment, not always within beauty as well. Like I've seen ones, have you seen that? I don't even know what you call it. It's like squashing. It's really heavy and it squashes like loads of items and squeezes them out.
I wake up at like 6 a.m. and then it's 7 a.m. because I've just been watching things being either squished or cakes being sliced into. It's a bit
and it's
myself.
Yeah.
The cake being sliced is my favorite, where
it's beautiful.
It's very easy to watch. It's a new genre, it's like every day that, that stuff that works on TikTok may not necessarily work on anything else. And it's just so for that particular moment in time and for that audience and what their appetite is. I mean, like that kind of goes to my next question, really, like what are the kind of things that you've seen that you've actually absolutely loved and you surprised yourself? Or what are the things that you really hated but has blown up? Hopefully you'll be honest with us from what you think.
I think when Instagram brought in Reels, everyone rolled their eyes a little bit and thought, well, why are you doing that? You're just trying to be TikTok. Yeah. But in actual fact, it's two very different platforms. And we've been able to see that from our results and our reporting. So with trial and error, we've seen something that completely blows up on Instagram Reels does not work on TikTok. TikTok needs to really maintain that raw, organic feel. And we do this. It literally has to be somebody filming that in their house. It can't be polished. It can't be something that's shot in a studio. It's just really raw, really organic, and something that you can have a bit of fun with. Like we like to jump on the challenges, skincare challenge or the dancing challenge as well. Somehow we try and make those work for beauty too. But yeah, Instagram Reels has been a weird one because it is very different content that works well over there. And we're seeing the reach of that content just explode versus our, normal in-feed video or even our IGTV videos. I said earlier that the long form video isn't really matching any of the short form video we're doing on Instagram Reels. So that's been really interesting. And I know, I definitely was one of those people that rolled my eyes at Instagram and thought, guys, what are you doing with releasing this feature? I do think it's more difficult to use than TikTok, though. I don't know if you guys have tried it, but TikTok's really straightforward and easy to use, whereas Reels, I don't know, I think they need to work on that one a little bit more.
Yeah, I tried a reel recently and I was like, I don't know how people do, because I think the time frame's also quite tight, and I guess you don't have as many. TikTok gives you at least transition prompts, whereas you really have to have planned it in your head, like very, very sort of concretely prior, and work really tightly with it. But I think I was also quite skeptical because I thought, I don't want TikTok on Instagram. I want, these are two separate spaces. But seeing how they're performing differently is quite interesting. But I've seen some beauty influencers say that certain things that they post on TikTok performing, they migrate it over to Instagram and it's performing better, which I don't know if it's like a time for, maybe they're spending a bit more time, or so I think it's quite interesting that even for influencers, they're trying to figure out what works, and that content is like, this is from TikTok, but it's performed better on Instagram or Twitter. I think Twitter is just a place you can blow anything up because people can just write their own narratives, and it takes on a life of its own.
Yeah, definitely.
Is Facebook still king?
Look, working more in the organic realms of social, I would say you need to have it. It's something you need to have. And it's still, if you look at insights, it's still the most used social media platform globally. But from a brand perspective, I think definitely utilize the paid aspect of Facebook. But from my standpoint, we use it more as a way to chat to our customers and sort out customer service queries. I think these groups that have started to, come about, they're really cool. I would love to be able to have enough resource to start one of these Facebook groups where it's just a group of people who love beauty, love to chat about it. I think that they're super nice. But at the moment, I feel like they need their own moderator 24/7. And at the moment, we just don't have that resource. But I think they're a really good element of Facebook. Whereas I think organically, you're not really showing up on people's news feeds anymore if you're a brand. I think paid's the way to go for Facebook, personally.
Just a follow-up question from that. I mean, this goes back to your days as a student, I guess. How do you kind of, you have a narrative, or you have a story, or you have something to say for each product or update that you're making on your socials. How do you make sure that your message stays relevant for different mediums that you go on? So, for example, you've just started a TikTok account. How do you make sure that the same message is being portrayed on TikTok as it is on Instagram, for example, where you got less and less time to actually tell that kind of story?
I think it's all about the content, really. If we're talking about TikTok and Instagram specifically, like, we would definitely create a completely different video for TikTok than we would for Instagram. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about something being super polished versus something being raw and looking very organic, which is going to work better on TikTok.
I wanted to ask, is the realm of social strategy. Now, I think a lot of people are surprised about how many layers it takes to sort of get a social media plan put together. Because I think my friend once looked on my computer and was a bit terrified at the amount of tabs I had open just looking at socials. But I think we're seeing, obviously, there's multi-platform consideration now, but brands want to keep the same message because, essentially, when you're talking about a product, there is a certain message you want to put out there. How, looking at strategy now, are brands, adapting language to fit the trends of social media movement? So how are brands having to think about language, where in the past I think you could have a longer tagline or you had a whole sort of story? How do you think language is changing to adapt, and how's that affecting strategy?
I think in terms of social copy and language, I would say we can get away with more long form copy on Instagram specifically. We do have a blog as well. So we like to promote that where we can and drive traffic to that blog where people who are really analytical and really want to get a deep dive into the products and like our opinions and our research around the products can kind of go over there and do that deep dive. But for our customers specifically, I think they're already quite well versed in the beauty world. They're already really invested and interested. So we do like to use a lot of long form copy on Instagram where we're talking to ingredients and the science behind the brands and the products that we're marketing. And I don't know if that's down to who we're reaching on Instagram versus something like TikTok.
Kristen, I have a question for you.
Okay.
I think Nikki's been reading too many books today, and she's still stuck in the world of literature where you... I'm joking. No, what I want to ask you, Kristen, is do you spend time researching the people that you're targeting in terms, not just like in advertising, but, like when you think of who's watching your content, how do you go about researching them, or how do you go about what they like, what they don't like, that kind of thing?
Sure. Well, I think people are very vocal within the beauty world. They'll tell you if they don't like something, and they'll absolutely tell you if they love something. We've launched whole brands based on what our community has told us, which has been like so cool, because again, we can be reactive with that. And that kind of builds that element of trust from our side. Like they can see we're listening to them, we're seeing them, we're acknowledging what they're saying. They've taken the time to leave that comment, right? So their comment has been able to create, us launching a new brand or a new product. And I think that's quite common in the beauty industry. Definitely when I've been at past brands and we've wanted to release a new product, or maybe a new shade of an eyeshadow, or, something like that, we've always ran polls and asked our customers, what they would like to see from us, really use that research to kind of shape our MPD process. And that's been a really nice thing. And that's been really interesting. I think sometimes when you work for a brand or a company, you become so involved, you're almost in a bubble and you don't connect with what the perception of the brand is from the outsider's point of view, or perhaps from a new customer's point of view. We might spend all of our time talking to our existing customers and forget about those new customers that we can acquire if we just kind of step out of that bubble for a little bit. So I think we found focus groups really helpful, especially those with people who have never shopped with us before or don't really know a lot about us. That's really helped for shaping the brand strategy going forward, and how we kind of story tell around us as a brand versus, somebody that's shopped with us for years that knows all about us, but we're just focusing on them constantly and not really thinking about anyone else. Oh, that was a terrible answer, guys.
No, it's like what you're trying to say is like sometimes because you're in your bubble so much, well, like Nikki was earlier, I guess. You kind of, you need to get out of your head or your team.
You do, yeah. And I think focus groups are a really good way to do that. Something that looks so great to you when you're planning or shooting or, could make no sense at all to somebody who's a new customer. So I think definitely in terms of shaping the brand, focus groups have been super helpful.
Actually, that's my next question. Has there been something that you've posted that you thought, oh, this is just regular, and then it kind of blew up? And also the opposite around, where you thought, oh, this is going to get crazy likes, or this is going to get lots of engagement, but then it's kind of fallen flat?
Yeah, definitely. So many times. And just when you think you've got that formula so correct that, nothing you post ever again is going to flop, something will happen and all of the content that you've banked on is, just falling flat all the time. So I feel like it might even be something that's not really related to, a specific product or a brand. It might even be, a funny meme because, I don't know, today's St. Patrick's Day, a funny meme that you think, oh, wow, people are going to find this so funny. It's going to get loads of engagement. The reach is going to be out of control. I'm ready for this. You post it and then nothing. happens.
I guess following the thread of that conversation, and I'm back in the real world, guys. So one thing we're seeing now is, culture and politics is a conversation that everyone sort of expects to be a part of. How do you balance, responding or continuing to exist on social media while so many things are going on politically that I'm going to expected to have a voice on? So, conversations about diversity or BLM, like these things.
I think being in beauty, that's kind of something we do need to have positioning on and something we do need to talk about. I think definitely, especially like in the last 12 months, we've all been consuming way more content than we ever have because we have been in these lockdowns. And I do think from a beauty perspective, not almost expected to have a political stance in beauty, but I feel like we are, but we should. Do you know what I mean?
Like what kind of conversation happens when, when you're inside of a major beauty brand and something happens in the real world? Obviously, everyone's thinking about it and talking about it, especially on, the platforms that you publish in. And how do how do you kind of negate the difference or kind of traverse between what's something you should post versus, what the hell's going on in the real world, especially in the last 16 months? It's been one thing after another. How does that conversation happen in the world of inside of the companies that you've been in?
I don't think in the last 12 months anyone could continue posting as normal or speaking around the same narrative without addressing everything that was going on in the world, because it would have just been completely tone deaf. We quickly had to rethink our strategy when we first went into lockdown. We couldn't be talking about the latest and greatest makeup releases because nobody was wearing makeup because everybody was confined to their home. It was more about how do we continue telling our story and our talking to our products whilst being current and relevant in what's happening in the world around us. I don't think people would continue following somebody that was so tone deaf and not talking about what was happening right now. So we needed to be quite reactive in how we worked and how we went on. I feel like that because we were consuming so much more content within the last 12 months, that everybody's lives were essentially on social media. That's how we were getting our news. That's how we were talking to our friends and family. We weren't seeing anybody in real life. We weren't having the opportunity to offload to anybody that we were meeting socially. I think with everything, we needed to make a huge U-turn and just think about, okay, well, how are we talking to what's relevant and what's real and what's happening in the world right now? And being really reactive within the last 12 months has been key. And, we've seen some brands that have been doing it perfectly, but we've also seen brands that have been completely tone deaf to the situation, and they have been held accountable by their own followers. You can see it in the comments section. So I would say, definitely being able to be super quick thinking and super reactive and just having that conversation internally about what we can do. It's all been so hard too because everyone's been working from home. So you can't have your usual brainstorming session that you would do with the rest of your team in person. So it has been a challenging time, but we're in that tunnel, like you said earlier. So we're kind of seeing the light.
I think from our perspective, running a small business where we can get away with literally not saying anything for weeks and months because we have nothing to say. But when we do say something, it's kind of sensitive, and also kind of the universe that we are in kind of acknowledges what's going on. And although we don't really talk about it because we're not a news organization, we try to kind of lighten the mood and, kind of stay top of mind with our clients or people who follow us. It's been really tricky just to stay out of things for me personally for interesting content. I don't know what you think, Nikki. Are there any brands that you follow that you think should say something that don't? What's your perspective as a person?
I think it's very complex because it's the balance of the personal versus the professional, right? Because I might have things I'm like, we should say this, but does it fit in with the company tone? Would customers look at this and think this is something that I believe that the company is doing from a genuine perspective, or are they doing it because it's expected of them? And I think it's towing that line. And I think, that we saw that happen over summer, last year with the Black Square movement, where some brands, it just felt very disingenuous because, if you looked down their page, it wasn't like what had been posted in the past wasn't reflective of, that singular Black Square. And it's also that balance of, I think brands, sometimes it's just better to say, actually, this might be where we've missed something, or just completely say this is not something we wish to comment on, rather than trying to follow the trends. But I think it's quite hard because obviously there's this social media reaction where you can suddenly be trending and you're like, we are trying to stay out of this, and is a day of trending, would it affect the business in any sustainable way? And it's these measurements. And unfortunately, I think people, Kristen can tell us more about this as a social media manager. you have to make these calculations and you have to be very reactive. And when it's a smaller brand, I think sometimes you can say this will be fine. But when it's a bigger brand, you're answering to so many different stakeholders. And how do you say to them, we just have to let 72 hours go by and this will be fine? And how do you get to trust that, you understand the market?
And because
new words versus your one word, basically.
Yeah, we're like front and center talking to those customers constantly. It's really hard sometimes to get your point of view across to a stakeholder, like you said, because they're not talking to the customer. They're not seeing it firsthand. And often, I don't know if it's just me because I'm a super sensitive person, you can take bad criticism from followers on Instagram quite personally because that's, obviously your work. But then at the end of the day, that's your brand philosophy. It's not you. They're not bashing me as a person. It's sometimes quite hard to put your feelings to one side and continue. Not that you're working from a gut feeling, but sometimes it's important to challenge, people within your business and say, look, the customers are telling me this. I can show this, screenshot of comments to you. We really need to listen and we really need to take this feedback on board because it's important and it's important to them. They've taken the time to leave these comments on our page. It's not trolling. That's a completely different thing. You do feel very conflicted sometimes working in social because you're almost the middleman. You're receiving that feedback from the followers and from the customers, and then you're having to talk to your stakeholders and vice versa almost.
Wow, that's a mic drop.
Yeah. But it's true. It's been true with every company I've worked. And it could be, a really basic decision about a specific promo or something that's going on. And you kind of think in your head, hang on a minute, last time we did something similar, didn't go down very well. But because, I don't know, people working on that side of the business aren't in touch with the customers, they're not seeing the comments, they're not, working with a customer services team, receiving the emails. It's sometimes, we need a little bit more consultation between, those two sides of the business.
What are your advice on dealing with trolls? And I'm sure you've had a fair share of them over the years.
Like I said to you, I take it really personally a lot of the time. My advice would be don't take it personally, firstly, but sometimes it's really hard to do. We always take that conversation kind of offline, try and talk to them within the DMs, get to the root of the actual problem. Often it could be, they've had a bad experience in store or something's happened with their order. And it could be as basic as, just resolving that. I would say, most of the time there's reason behind the trolling. So trying to get to the root of the problem and being able to solve the initial problem, I would say, would be my advice. But it's really, like, as a social media manager, it's so interesting because you end up wearing so many different hats. You're the social media strategist, you're the customer service representative, you're the community manager talking to all the people. I would say no day is ever the same in social.
Wow.
I was going to ask just about sort of, team morale. So how do you sort of, given that you're taking things personally as the manager, how do you engage the wider team to sort of move past these moments?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, you just have to laugh about it, right? So it might be something. It might be something that I take personally for 5 minutes just by myself, and I just kind of sit there and think, okay, I don't know this person, they don't me. This is not a reflection of who I am. This is somebody who's frustrated. I try and take a time out before I actually respond or engage with the troll or the person on social. And then I would say more often than not, we're able to solve the issue. At the end of the day, me and my team just laugh about it. I think we could definitely write a book about all the strange encounters we've had on social, definitely. There's this new Instagram page that explains the vibe of working in social perfectly. I think it's called They Said Work in Social or something along those
we'll check
lines.
it
I'll
out.
have to send it to you. But it's a series of memes and every day they post. And I just think, absolutely, that's so true. It's such a weird world. Again, it's never the same day ever. Whereas I think other parts of the business, especially within my own marketing team, everything's kind of really planned, really structured. And then I'm just this crazy mess in social over on the side here.
That's your gift, Kristen. You know, like you're able to take all this into account and still just do your thing. One thing I was going to say is like, in terms of social media could be a brutal world where it's savagery in terms of, I can give you hundreds of examples where brands have posted something which is so, you know, like on retrospective, it's awful. You should never have said, and I can just give you those examples, but do you ever see that and think, oh my God, I feel bad for the social media manager?
All the time. Or I see a company being cancelled on something, and it's funny, working in a multi-branded retailer, I know a lot of these social media managers that work for the individual brands. I work with them on a daily basis. So if I see another brand getting hate or a little bit of heat somewhere else, I automatically think, oh, that poor person is probably sitting at their computer at 8 p.m. at night just trying to diffuse this situation. And unfortunately, social media doesn't sleep. It's still happening. It's still something we need to keep an eye on over the weekend, in the evening. It's just constant. So yeah, I do feel bad for people. I definitely think of the social media managers first, and also the customer services teams, because obviously the forefront of the business, they're the ones that are talking to the customers most. So in terms of my strategy and my thinking, that's probably where my strategy would come from first. So that thinking about, if I did this, what would the results look like? And if it was a negative result, how could my social media team and the customer services team handle that in an appropriate way? Whether it's like something as simple, we've launched a new product, it's something really innovative and new to the market, but we haven't explained how to use it properly anywhere online. So I'm always trying to think about, what can I do to make their lives that little bit easier?
I think that's it from me. This has been just a really interesting conversation. I think, some of my questions were a bit in the realm of the not here. Let's call it that.
Oh, don't get sensitive. I know you, Nikki.
No, I'm kidding. But yeah, no, this has been wonderful. And I think it's really interesting to just speak about, I guess, the last 16 months and also, the way social media has become its own fantastic beast of different platforms and brands, having to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And I guess how you've also, as a social media manager, pivoted and had to understand what works and what doesn't work. I don't think, anything more from you, Sads?
I've got two things actually. One is, how have you found creating content during the lockdown been for you? Especially because, you are usually out and about, and, the world that you live in where, you can go into a studio, you do behind the scenes. How have you found that? And how have you been able to cope with that?
Well, it has been very challenging. And also, I think back to what we were saying about being reactive and still staying true to what's happening in the world right now, we couldn't post that traditional content where a makeup artist was applying makeup on a model anyway, even if we filmed it 2 years ago. That's just not what was happening at the time. So again, thinking about the strategy, how can we make this relevant to the world now, which is in a very different place, but also how can we achieve this? So I guess that's been one of the blessings of TikTok. We've been able to do that sort of thing in our own homes. We do deal with a lot of beauty products, so kind of couriering them around London and getting them to the places that they need to be has been very stressful, but we've made it work. I think everyone's really kind of come together and tried new and different things, and they've all turned out to be really exciting. And we'll definitely use some of the learnings over lockdown going forward. We've done a whole heap of digital events. I think that's not going anywhere fast. Our customers love it. They just log on, at 6 p.m. every evening and they watch a masterclass over Zoom or an Instagram live. And that's just been a really great way to kind of still connect and have those almost live event experiences digitally. But yeah, from the content side, I think definitely the fact that we've taken a step back from that real polished, produced content and being able to try something new with this more raw organic content has been really exciting. And I think something that we will still implement into our strategies going forward, even after we've left this lockdown.
Well, if you could go and work in any other industry apart from beauty, which one would you go for? Are there any brands that you think, oh, you know?
That's a really hard question. I guess it's still almost beauty, but maybe like more of the wellness industry. So haven't really thought about leaving beauty, to be honest.
What are your favorite non-beauty brands that you love? And, you know, are there any companies whose socials you think, wow, these people are doing really a good job?
Definitely. I've been watching, you know, innocent fruit smoothie drinks for years. And I just think they employ the best wordsmiths in the game, because they will do, you know, like a live tweet of, you know, watching Love Island or funny things like that. And I just think they're so reactive and so real. It makes it really funny. And I really wish sometimes I had that ability to be that funny and that thoughtful when it came to creating coffee. Also, I don't know if you've seen, and this was pointed out to me by our TikTok account manager, Gucci's TikTok. Have you ever seen that page?
I'm going to check it out. But, you know, the thing is, Kristen, you know, like these people, it's probably not just one, it's probably like a room full of people contributing to that one tweet. They shouldn't feel too bad.
I know. But you think like Gucci would be boring on TikTok. Like what are they going to put on TikTok? But they've created all of their own bespoke sounds and they take part in all of these challenges. And it's just like a really cool page. I think they've done a really good job for a brand that's probably, if we're talking, you know, most of the TikTok audience is Gen Z, a lot of those guys probably would never think to even look at Gucci because it's way out of the sphere of, you know, anything they would, but they've done a really good job, I have to say.
What are you going to miss the most about UK, and what are you most looking forward to about going back to Melbourne?
I think I'll just miss London as a whole. I think after 11 years, I'm still learning about some new place or something cool to do over here. It's like I've never fully grasped the whole city or seen the whole city. There's always more to discover. They always make this joke that Australia's like behind all of the other countries. But in terms of timings, we kind of are, because we're like a season behind everybody else. So it's very common that you'll see like a clothing trend not make it to Australia until the following year. I just love London. I just think it's so forward thinking and so exciting. But in saying that, I am excited to get back to the Australian weather.
Oh, yeah. Having to, I guess, shake your shoes before you wear it. You know, that's a new thing for you guys, you know, the spiders and everything.
Somebody actually sent me a TikTok before, and it was a guy going to the toilet, lifting up the toilet seat, and they were fake spiders, but he was making a joke out of it. And they said, "Is this what really happens?" And you know, we like to play that kind of stuff up. So I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna have to get used to that again. And they're like, oh, so. I am looking forward to it. It'll be the first time that my husband's ever lived in Australia. So I think my excitement to see him explore Australia is probably the most at the moment.
Last thing, Kristen, how can people get in touch with you?
I think via LinkedIn or via my Instagram, which I'm always on. My Instagram handle is @canvasbagchris, and my name's Kristen, so it's KRIS at the end. And that is something that's a nickname that I was given kind of at the end of high school, because I really like canvas bags. Is that weird? So we have a comedian in Australia called Tim Minchin, and we were going through a period where they started banning plastic bags at all of our like grocers and supermarkets. So you needed to take plastic canvas bags around with you. Otherwise you had nothing to carry your shopping in. And I think it's weird to say now, because I feel like that's a very standard practice these days. Like you would just take a bag anyway. But he had a song about taking your canvas bags to the supermarket. And I was always that friend that had multiple canvas bags in their car. So I became Canvas Bag Chris. That's so embarrassing to admit.
Yeah, I actually love that because it's the one thing. You mentioned Australia being presumed to be behind. It's actually an example of Australia being ahead because when did we do this? At the start of last year?
This was years ago. I remember it really well. It started within the regional communities as well. So the more country towns were doing it first before all the major cities, which was really interesting.
So for those of you who don't know what it can, it's like a tote bag, which is made of cotton or that kind of thing. The thing is, I actually have one right there. It just follows me everywhere. Thank you so much for your time, Kristen.
Thanks, guys.
We wish you'd stay in London so we can have a proper drink as a farewell. But I guess we'll have to just come and see you in Australia, or you'll need to come back.
Well, yes, I'll definitely be back. My husband's whole family's here, so it's not goodbye, it's see you later.
I've lost 2 friends to Australia and a whole squad of people to Berlin. You know, it's just I think part of living in London is just literally learning to say goodbye, hello, and, making new friends who kind of constantly move around. But with that, thank you again for your time, Kristen. We've enjoyed having this really good chat with you. I think the most insightful thing was, the person behind these major accounts, you kind of got an insight into their world. All the things that goes into even the smallest things that you wouldn't really think about. And that kind of really opened my eyes. Nikki, you can have the final word. Putting her under pressure.
Kristen, it's been wonderful speaking to you and just hearing your wealth of experience. Just wish you good luck on the other side of the world.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed this episode, and don't forget to listen to other episodes of Zero Calorie Marketing podcast.
If you have a minute, do leave us a review on whichever platform you happen to be enjoying this episode.
We'd love to hear from our listeners, so drop us a message with guest suggestions, thoughts on the episodes, and even compliments at zcm@interestingcontent.co.uk.